Hey guys, so I forgot to unmute my desktop audio while watching this, so I'm gonna overlay my reactions with a recording of up to the point where I stopped when I realized this was happening. I shockingly had a lot to say up until the 3 minute and 41 second mark, so the syncing might look a little off. That's why, but yeah, my bad. Hello, everybody. My name is Lofter, and welcome to a kind of reaction video, sort of. I found this video that's talking about how gaming isn't fun anymore, which, just on face value, I fully disagree with. But I have a feeling it's more talking about things like microtransactions, DLC, that sort of thing. But it's really hard to say. So I wanted to watch it and do kind of like a live reaction. So, I mean, obviously this guy's way bigger than me, but shout out to Siggy Snake. And I found the video on Gym Leader Ed's video. He also did something similar to what I'm doing. I think I didn't watch either video yet because I wanted to kind of get a raw feeling without going too deep in it. So let's watch this. Let's see what his complaints are, and then I'll kind of give input as I go. But I'm curious as to why this person says gaming isn't fun anymore.
If you were to look at the video game industry of today, you might think gaming is in a golden age. Video games have never been more popular. Professional gaming is a growing and respected sport, and game publishers see record profits
That doesn't
year
mean as
after
much.
year. This surface-level success, however, conceals many of the
Okay, so first off, that is not surface level success. That's literally deep success. The fact that esports are huge right now, and the fact that there are just a plethora of good games coming out constantly, and the gaming industry booming. The gaming industry booming thing, because like even gacha games are considered games, right? Minimal effort. You charge $100 for a pack. You get 20,000 players. You've made $200,000, and you've spent 100 or 10,000 or whatever making the game. And of course those numbers vary, but it's roughly, you got stuff like Summoner's War, Epic 7, that sort of thing, where they pull big prices, they pull big profits, and realistically the game doesn't cost anywhere near that much to make. But
core issues plaguing modern games: hypermonetization,
yeah,
egregious laziness, and a total lack of passion or vision. In terms of quality and actual care put into games, modern gaming has been on a consistent decline for close to a decade now. From predatory microtransactions, to broken, unoriginal games, to the current drought of new and interesting IPs, gaming has been reduced from a form of entertainment and artistry to a
absolutely
corporatized money-making venture.
But that is the nature of capitalism. That's the society we live in. I mean, the same thing can be said about TVs, books, even like traditional art mediums like painting and stuff. They've all kind of been corporatized and started being used for profit rather than pleasure. Even this video right now, I'm not looking to make profit on YouTube, but I can't say that if like this video took off and got like 10 billion views and jacked up my subscribers, I would probably make more videos like this because we live in a world where you need money to eat. But it gets a little overboard when you get into capitalists, CEOs, all that stuff. That's not what we're here for. If you want to talk about that stuff, come to the Discord. We always talk about that stuff.
As someone who's been into gaming for the vast majority of my life, as someone who genuinely appreciates the passion and artistry present in games, this mass corporatization and denigration of the medium is depressing at best and infinitely vexing at worst. I know I'm not alone in this stance either. The countless failures and disappointments of the modern games industry has left most gamers
nearly
tired
unplayable
and
PS4.
frustrated.
Sorry for the rant post,
To
but this
that
is an
end,
excuse. That's
I want to
that's
chart
probably
the
a
slow
rant post
descent of
regardless.
this
But
once great industry, look at where it's heading, and what we should do
have
in response.
microtransactions become a norm, borderline ruin new age gaming for any? I mean, as long as the microtransactions do not affect the main game, then it's fine. Like if they intentionally tone down, like let's say because I play JRPGs, if they intentionally tone down experience gains so they can sell you experience booster packs so you can get your levels up at a reasonable rate, that's a problem. But something more along the lines of costumes. I don't mind if they put if you want to put out Dragon Quest 14, 13, where are we at? 12. Dragon Quest 12. and then flip it around and be like, okay, but you can buy this bikini outfit for this cute female character. Like, that's totally acceptable. I mean, sure, in the olden days, you might have been able to, get that stuff for free or whatever, but like you're also talking about like sprites and bad, PS1 graphics or stuff. Once they have to create entirely new like models and animations and stuff or something. Again, Epic 7 is a great example of this. They, their costume packs that they put out, they don't cost actual money. You can use in-game currency or you can buy them with money. And they change the animation some, which means they have to redraw the animations and create new sprites and that sort of thing. It's much different than it used to be.
Like and subscribe. Before we can discuss the dismal state of modern gaming, I want to first look at the era which preceded it, along with what made it unique. I think few would argue that the mid-90s to late 2000s was a true golden age of gaming, and for a number of reasons.
You should like and subscribe
While
to
the
him.
actual quality
Even
of
if you don't
games
like
from
and
this
subscribe to
time
me, go
period
like
can't
and
be
subscribe to him.
understated and will be discussed. One of the biggest factors in this golden age was the state of gaming and the broader games industry. Gaming was considered a more nerdy or unusual hobby back then.
Well, first off, that's virtually the beginning of gaming in general. Like, you had the Atari and the NES, but yeah, gaming didn't really hit like mainstream popularity until the early 90s. So of course it's going to be the golden age, especially if you grew up in that era. I was born in 84 and I've been gaming since I was 4. So obviously my brain thinks that Chrono Trigger is better than Final Fantasy 15. That's nostalgia. Well, I think that's also factually correct, but that's another conversation again. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another thing to keep in mind too is the population of the world was like half back then. If you go back and look at 1990, let's just say 1992, the world population. What was here? What was the population in 1992? There has to be a statistic. Okay, so yeah, there's literally 3 billion more people in the world right now than there was in 1992. So whenever you're talking about stuff like this right here, and you're like, oh, the where did it go? Did that flash that quickly? Okay, so 200 billion, so even in 2002, 38 billion. Okay, so let's look at 2002 then. 2002 population was 6.2 billion people. So again, there not only were there's not only more than 2 billion more people in the world, but also the people who were considered these nerdy kids had kids that they raised on gaming. I know personally, my best friend has 2 kids who are both little gamer girls. They're like 9 and 7, I think. No. They're like 12 and 9 now. But yeah, they both play the Switch. They both play the PS5. He has arcade machines set up in his basement, like with the OG Ninja Turtle games they play. We are raising our kids to be gamers. So that one gamer has turned into 3 gamers. So it makes sense that the games industry would be making a lot more money because there are more gamers because we raised our kids to be gamers.
You weren't getting bullied at school for not having the latest Fortnite skin, but for playing video games in the first place. This relative unpopularity meant that the games industry was just a fraction of its current size. Conversely, game developers and publishers were much more numerous back then. Various small and independent groups all competed in the open gaming market, and you'd either sink or swim depending on the quality of your games. While many studios sunk, those that swam were handsomely rewarded, and typically redoubled their efforts for their next project. Furthermore, these small studios were often staffed and led by dedicated gamers and enthusiasts. This naturally leads to much greater passion and care put into the games they produced. Take for example Bungie back in the early 2000s. Their singular goal when producing the Halo trilogy was to make the best, most enjoyable game possible, and it shows in their outlook.
The difference between good enough and awesome is so big.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's this standard set by everyone here that. I mean,
But
good
again,
enough
the
sucks.
problem
You
that
can't do good enough. It's a.
and I'm not
hard
arguing
thing
with
to
this
live
guy
up
at this
to, but
point. Like, this is definitely a great
games will be
point. There
better
was
for
more
it.
passion
We are the
back
most
then,
cynical
but again,
people.
this is
we are the jaded
the nature
crowd
of
who,
capitalism.
if a game doesn't
Rich
entertain us
people
in 5
see
minutes, we
that
stop playing
an
it.
industry
The
is
passion
doing
you see
well,
here is
they buy
honestly
said
commendable,
industry, and
and
then
something
they
found in abundance
suck
both at Bungie and
the
broader
love
games
out of
industry.
it and replace it with profits.
In addition to having an industry clearly committed to quality, the technological development seen in the 5th, 6th,
That's not true.
and 7th generations dramatically expanded what could be done with
At least not anymore.
the quality. The technological development seen in the 5th,
Ah, the
6th,
OG
and 7th
Xbox.
generations dramatically expanded what could be done with video games. This is perhaps best demonstrated by the transition from 2D to 3D, swapping pixels for polygons. An additional dimension not only enabled new and interesting forms of gameplay, but allowed for beautiful art styles and actually realistic graphics. These are your Killer 7s
That's
for
what
the
to point
former
out. The
and
background
Re
music
4s for
playing
the
is from
latter.
Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. It's
The
when it
size and
plays when
scope
you're
of
in the
games
town.
also increased
I know that music
substantially in this time
anywhere.
period,
It's one of my favorite games of all
going from
time.
megabytes in size to gigabytes. Whereas games on cartridges had to make best use of very limited real estate, CDs allowed for about as much game as you wanted, and it then
But now that it's back on, we can continue live reacting.
CDs allowed for about as much game as you wanted, and it then modern graphics. Finally, internet access had reached hundreds of millions, even billions by this time period, meaning games no longer had to be primarily single-player or couch co-op titles. In short, the games industry not only had the technology to make new and engaging games, but the will and passion to do so, and I feel the results truly speak for themselves.
More Shin Megami Tensei.
Gaming during this golden age was, as the name implies, a pretty good time. Quite simply put, gamers were spoiled for choice in the 90s and 2000s. While shovelware and cheap cash grabs
Well, we
certainly
still
were a
are
thing,
spoiled with
you had an
choices.
absolute smorgasbord of quality titles to choose from, no matter what you were looking for.
Now, see, okay,
Smorgasbord of
I have a problem
2000s.
with this statement.
While shovelware and cheap cash grabs certainly were a thing, you had an absolute
I mean, okay, Ocarina of Time, sure. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, sure. But Grand Theft Auto 4 is always... GTA games are always a mess when they come out. Like, they're always so full of bugs and stuff.
board of quality.
Super Mario Galaxy was okay. Mario Galaxy 2, sure. Red Dead Redemption 2... That's new. What are you talking about?
From no matter what you were looking for.
I guess the late
If you wanted to play
2010s?
something on your own, just pop in Tony Hawk or literally anything from Nintendo at the time.
That's
Friends were
untrue
open
as
to
hell.
Halo or Mario Kart to rage at and laugh over. And if you wanted to meet cool new people on the wide world of web, WoW was still relevant. And not terrible.
Yeah.
Gaming as a whole was just fun. People treated it as an enjoyable, exciting hobby. You'd hear from a friend that the new Scrimbo Bimblo slaps, drop 40 or 50 bucks on it, and have a good time. Gamers had hope in the industry, and while expectations weren't always met and missteps were had, it was good for a time. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end.
Tell me
The
why.
Roman Empire experienced unmatched
Okay,
prosperity
yeah,
and
Red Ring of
security
Death.
for hundreds of years, before its slow and pitiful death in the 5th century. Gaming is no different, and much like the Huns and Goths who brought low the Romans, it was an outside force which plunged the games industry into its dark age, the smartphone.
What?
In 1998, Nokia released their 6110 model of mobile phones. The 6110 offered numerous improvements and updates over the earlier Nokia 2110, one of which being the addition of Snake. Snake is a game you've likely heard of, seen, or played at some point.
Yeah.
You play as a snake navigating a plane in search of food. And
They
you can
still
maneuver
make
around
Snake
your
games. They're just
ever-lengthening body
evolved.
as you
There's
go
like
from point to point.
Snake.io and stuff.
It's a simple little game, something you could play for a few minutes at a time, but its inclusion in the 6110 was one of its most liked features. In line with this, mobile phones going forward would often include short little games similar in scope to Snake. Many of these games were shipped with the phone itself, and while it was possible to download additional games, they were never terribly common or popular. The system, however, would be completely turned on its head in 2007 upon the release of the iPhone. The iPhone, and more specifically its App Store, offered users a variety of applications and games for purchase.
Yeah.
Much like the iPhone itself, this store
God,
proved
Angry Birds
wildly
was
successful.
2009?
Though it released with only 500 apps, in just 2 years this number increased to well over 100,000, and these apps were downloaded over 2 billion times. Initially, the App Store would sell their games for a one-time, upfront cost. You know, how games were always sold.
Yeah.
This business model would eventually be expanded in 2009
Clash of
to give
Clans.
apps and their developers new and exciting ways of making money. The biggest addition were in-app purchases, a system we would now call microtransactions. While many apps made ungodly amounts of money off this system, perhaps the most influential and iconic game in this landscape is Candy Crush.
Yeah.
Candy Crush,
God, I can't
released in
believe
late
Candy Crush
2012,
is and was a
nothing
thing.
special as a game. You match 3 pieces of candy in a row to earn points and accomplish objectives. Match 3 titles had been around for some time and have had successful entries such as Bejeweled. What sets Candy Crush apart from its peers, however, was its method of monetization: predatory microtransactions. While Candy Crush was free to download, it was seemingly designed to incur, then profit off of addiction. First and foremost, the actual gameplay rewards you at every step, complimenting and praising you for making the right move or just having pieces fall in the right places.
Yeah.
You're given dopamine hit after dopamine hit with
I've
easy
never actually
levels
played
until you reach
Candy
a
Crush.
difficult one you can't quite beat. Candy Crush operates on a life system, and once you run out of lives, you're cut off from the flashy lights and easy dopamine. You can either wait a ridiculous, uncomfortable amount of time until you can get your dopamine fix, or just pay 99 cents for an immediate refill. Both options funnel you into playing, and eventually paying more and more, and it was this Skinner box design that led to Candy Crush's success. To put it in perspective, Candy Crush alone brought in about $1.1 billion in 2014. That same year, the entire games industry had revenues of $85 billion. A single game with a basic art style and simple gameplay loop made up over 1% of the games industry,
1.6,
all because it had an
1.7%.
unbelievably effective microtransaction system. This runaway success told the games industry 2 things. First of all, video games were big money, a business venture that could be insanely profitable. This is not to say the games industry wasn't already massive. It was raking in tens of billions at the time, but
Sure.
it put into perspective just how much money you can make off of games. Second, a game doesn't have to be good in the traditional sense to be profitable. Making a game that is legitimately fair and enjoyable doesn't have to be a prerequisite for success. It just has to have the right mechanisms to fleece people of their money and have them come back for more.
Yeah, that's
It was
true.
around this time period of the early to mid-2010s that you began to see the exportation of this philosophy from the mobile market to gaming as a whole. It's this philosophy which treats games more as a dry business just to make money, rather than an earnest form of art and escapism that led to
Okay,
the slow
so-
decline of gaming.
A lot of this is very true, but the thing is, there's still so many games that aren't this. Again, if anything, this is a commentary on the capitalistic nature of society and the greed of some companies. I mean, there's still great games that come out. There's still Chained Echoes and Fire Emblem Engage, which, yeah, had DLC that did give it, it's a single player game. The DLC gives you some advantages, but it's fun DLC and it's not related or required to enjoy the main game. Oops.
For anyone who's paid even a modicum of attention to the broader games industry over the past few years, you'd find it mired in scandals, mediocrity,
Yes.
and disappointment. The reason for this goes back to the philosophy shift mentioned earlier. Games aren't being made to be enjoyed, but to make money. It's this hard shift in priorities that
They
has just
have
gutted
to
the soul
do
of gaming
both.
and replaced it.
I mean, if the game's not fun, people aren't going to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on it. I mean, look at the original Overwatch. The people who played Overwatch up until the end genuinely had fun with it.
With flowcharts, focus groups,
I'm
and
not one of
revenue
them.
projections. Take, for example, the explosive growth in microtransactions over the past decade or so. Modern games are often replete with issues such as slow progression, unbalanced gameplay, or a lack of content. This isn't a mistake. These issues are introduced on purpose, with the only way to overcome them being microtransactions. It doesn't matter if fair systems are dropped for a less engaged.
And this is true. This is what I was talking about earlier. For players, a sense of pride and accomplishment for unlocking different heroes. As for cost, we selected initial values based on data from open beta and other adjustments made to milestones attainable via gameplay. We appreciate the candid feedback and the passion the community has put forth around current topics here on Reddit.
Gameplay loop. It doesn't matter if microtransactions prioritize the size of your bank account rather than in-game skill. It doesn't matter if microtransactions have led to some of the most addictive, predatory systems imaginable. Microtransactions make an incomprehensible amount of money. That's the only reason they're so prevalent. To the games industry, it's more important that their septuagenarian shareholders see a 15% APY than actually give their customer base a semi-decent product.
That's true.
Outside of making games with these predatory, money-first systems, modern games are often released in a broken and buggy state. The
And I
recent poster
think
child of incomplete garbage is
he has another video that came out recently called The Golden Age of Indie Games, and I think that's because Chained Echoes is, by all rights and reasons, an indie game. Fire Emblem Engage, however, is not. But I also have to admit that pretty much every AAA title I buy these days has day one paid DLC, which is obnoxious.
none other than Saints Row. Aside from having some genuinely cringe-inducing writing and gameplay that's boring 2 hours in, the game just does not function. Pull up literally any full-length review, and you'll see a deluge of bugs, glitches, and broken features in this game.
That's true of any open
Saints
world
Row
game.
isn't an outlier.
Not
in
that I
this
care
regard
about
either.
Saints Row.
You had Battlefield 2042 last year, and
Oh,
Cyberpunk
God.
2077 the year before that. Both incredibly hyped games that
Here's the thing about Cyberpunk 2077, though. Yeah, it came out busted. Absolutely broken to hell. 100% cannot argue that fact. But they had your money, and they fixed it anyways. That does show heart and care. Even if they messed it up when it first came out, the game works now, and apparently it's fantastic.
should not have shipped in the state
So
they were
you
in.
can speak with your
people
wallet,
at-
because their fear was, Cyberpunk 2077 was awful. And so there's a high risk that our next game will do poorly because this one did so badly. So now they fixed the game and it's great. And now you have this other thing where now their next game that they put out is going to be a trial for them. It's either going to be people are going to be apprehensive to buy it. They're going to be like, "Well, I'll just wait until they fix it." So they're going to have to get through the hump that is their next game to prove that they can put out quality stuff. So their next game's going to do rather poorly to start with. Then maybe 6 months to a year later, it'll do better in sales. And then their game after that, depending on how they did with the second game. I'm saying the second game. I know they made games previously, but I'm just going in terms of starting at Cyberpunk. The third game is going to rely on their second game. Their second game is going to have to come out really good. It's going to have to eat a loss at first. And then the word's going to get out that the game works and is good, and then people will start buying it a few months in. But then their next game after that comes out, and people are going to be like, okay, well, they actually can put out quality products, and then it'll sell. Now, if they make the same mistake twice in a row, that's it. They're done.
At the helm, and more specifically the publishers, just stop caring.
And then, but
They
there's
do a bunch of
also
gullible saps and
there's also the Battlefield and Call of Duty fanboys and girls. They're always going to play the new Call of Duty no matter how bad it is, and there's no speaking with your wallet because those people are also running on a capitalistic nature. Because what's happening is content creators such as Ninja and Dr. Infamous or whatever the hell his name is, they play those games because those games are their money makers on Twitch and YouTube. And then other people play those games because they want to be like their heroes and idols and stuff. And then those games sell whether they're good or not because those are big eyeball games. So a lot of this actually falls into the lap of content creators. You have people like Jacksepticeye and Markiplier and stuff who play a lot of indie games and get those games out there, and they do the industry a lot of good. But you have a lot of content creators as well out there who play AAA titles. I'm one of them. I play a lot of AAA titles, but I play what's in my niche.
and stupid teens would drop $60 on their latest shitfest, so why even bother?
Exactly.
Worst of all, if a game totally flops, many of these studios and publishers are so large they can just eat the losses, shelve their broken game, and move on to the next lazily made entry. Finally, this
But if they do that too many times, like I said, there's some exceptions. Battlefield, Call of Duty, those big games, they're always going to sell. And that's on the people who buy it. Because they're saying, yes, we'll buy this. But most AAA titles that are bad, they get fixed.
corporatized business-centric approach to game development has just killed any passion and vision within the larger industry. Rather than prioritizing player experience and creating new IPs, game developers are more preoccupied with garbage sequels, unnecessary remakes,
I mean, to be fair, that game looks really good. And now we know the reason it got remade was because the TV series was in production. So, but I mean, the difference between those two screenshots shows it was worth the remake.
Is shameless trend chasing. For me, the epitome of this visionless, trend chasing game development has been the new Halo trilogy. I use the term trilogy loosely here, as the stories in each game have little to do with each other and are all pretty mediocre in their own right.
I honestly don't know
Outside
anything
of this
about the new
lackluster writing,
Halos.
every new
I
Halo
stopped playing
aims
Halo after
mechanics from
3.
other popular games, presumably because money. 4 has score streaks and loadouts, 5 has pay-to-win loot boxes, and Infinite has a live service season pass that's so barren and devoid of content, it's genuinely shocking.
Ugh.
One of the most groundbreaking, influential, and just plain fun series ever created was utterly castrated by out-of-touch, money-first suits. Most tragically of all, this fate has fallen countless other IPs and series, all reduced to shells of their former selves by visionless hacks and unoriginal frauds.
That's Konami's fault. That's what Konami does.
The AAA games industry has
Call of Duty,
fundamentally
it's what I was
regressed,
talking about.
its priorities totally misaligned with the point of gaming, and unfortunately, it's a situation that I don't see changing anytime soon. It's blatantly obvious that money is the biggest, if not single motivating factor in making games nowadays, and if that's the industry's goal, then they're certainly succeeding. There's no longer a major incentive to make interesting or good games, when you can just copy-paste total schlock every year and still make billions. You can vote with your wallet to change things, sure, but the next whale they catch completely cancels out whatever difference you might have made. Furthermore, the AAA games industry has largely consolidated under a select few major corporations and studios.
This is true.
This, coupled with the increasing barriers to entry due to technological advancement, means there's little reason for innovation and few grounds for competition. The whole of AAA gaming has just become stale and sad, and out-of-touch ghouls like Phil Spencer and Andrew Wilson are perfectly fine with that. I mentioned at the beginning that I discussed what should be done regarding the modern gaming industry's dismal state, and I feel the best option for gamers is nothing. The modern games industry at this point is a joke. I think by now this should be fairly obvious. Huge conglomerates just push out unoriginal, unenjoyable, and/or incomplete titles year after year, yet are able to bank off of microtransactions and a lazy consumer base. Unless CEOs actually start caring about art, outside of money laundering, or if predatory microtransactions get regulated into oblivion, I highly doubt there will be any major changes in the industry. So why bother with it at that point? It's better to avoid this constant deluge of disappointment than hope COD 37 will be marginally better than its predecessors. Instead, rather than deal with the cultural void that is the modern games industry, just go back to that golden age. A friend of mine remarked that it's sad some of the best games ever have already been made, and while this is pretty accurate, it's also true. There are countless excellent titles from back in the day that many of us haven't gotten around to or didn't hear of when they were released. They're games often made with passion, and because you couldn't just patch in fixes back in the day, they're actually complete.
Yeah.
Furthermore, strong communities for retro titles are still going strong to this day, be it for speedrunning or just for enthusiasts of a particular series. Alternatively, while AAA publishers and studios have seemingly abandoned passion for green slips of paper, you're much more likely to find well-crafted, lovingly made games from indie studios. From early classics such as Super Meat Boy and Binding of Isaac, to recent titles like Hades or Ultra Kill, indie games have consistently churned out innovative and engaging games actually worth your time.
Sure.
While there are
but
weird and bad entries,
here's the thing that he's kind of glossing over or not mentioning. His golden age of gaming, Halo and Chrono Trigger and Lufia and all these early really good games that we all look up to. In the 90s, everyone was indie. The best games have always been indie titles for this exact reason. It's just that we remember all the good games as good games, but they were always all indie titles because they were all small companies. Yeah, they had a lot of developers and stuff, but gaming was new still. Now that gaming is an established thing, of course, the bigger companies are going to create money, and the smaller companies are going to create art. It's the same for anything. You go look at even horror movies, right? If you go on YouTube, you'll find better horror, 20-minute horror shorts on YouTube than you'll get from the most recent, biggest Hollywood horror blockbuster. It's always been that way with every piece of art. The big stuff gets corporatized, and the small stuff is better than the big stuff.
In the indie scene, at the very least,
Eventually,
it's a space that cares about
these
the art of gaming
indie
along with their community.
developers will become
Finally,
the AAA
if you
title
absolutely
developers.
have to play the latest Gears of Halo Theft Auto 5 or Gorbino's Quest, get it at a discount. Or, at a discount.
At what?
All in all.
Oh, I think it's 5-finger discount. But yeah, eventually, you know, these indie developers will become the AAA developers. And then I liked them better back when they did this, and now they're greedy, and because they sold their business, they made their money. Like, it's just the way the world works right now. Do I like it? Hell no. But I think he's just being way too hard on game developers when it's not actually their problem, and it's more or less the fault of content creators and the gamer base.
Even if the modern games industry is in its dark age, it doesn't mean gaming has to be. There are more than enough excellent games, new and old, to play and enjoy. Games that are free of the hollow influence of this once great industry. Thank you so much for watching this video. While I haven't covered gaming content much on this channel, outside of a video on last year's active...
But yeah, so be sure to, you know, subscribe to me because it's fun, right? But no, just be sure to give Siggy Snake obviously a look. And since I pulled the idea from Gym Leader Ed, go ahead and check him out. He covers monster taming games. He's pretty interesting. It's way too specific of a niche, but it's always informative. At the very least, his weekly updates and his monster taming convention, whatever it's called. No, the Monster Taming Direct, that's what it was. Those are really good to watch. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Deuces, dummies.